Kyoko was awoken by some kind of commotion in the shrine. Her muscles ached badly, and she felt drained of the little energy she had left. There was enough light that morning to see something fidgeting inside the skeletons cloaked in ivy, and Kyoko crept closer to remove a few stems to peek inside. Despite her dreariness, her heart beat heavily. She drew the ivy curtain slowly and found a fox kid trapped inside the ivy womb of the deceased vixen Huldra. When Kyoko tried to sever the brittle ivy stems, the kid bit her. Kyoko licked her finger and frowned at the little fox. "You want to get out, don't you? Then let me help you," she growled. "Wait, Kyoko," commanded a female voice from the shadows. "Are you hurt? Did he taste your blood?" said Kara worryingly. The Huldra flew beside Kyoko and held a bitten finger. "Kara, you came back," said Kyoko with desperation. Kara squeezed Kyoko's hand and stared at the trickle of blood as if under hypnosis. They should never mutate so young. "Mutate," Kyoko replied, slightly confused and fed up. "Let's just say the ritual worked, thanks to you. A long-lost heir was stolen from us many moons ago. They were his parents. You're saying this little biter didn't sneak in last night to find a place to sleep? I'm sure he just got lost and snuggled under the ivy covers. A nice comfy bed of bones." "Do you remember anything?" asked Kara. "I know I died. That's for certain. That's all I want to remember. Well, this young Huldra was born during the night in this shrine, and unfortunately it will need to feed soon. Does he need some milk? Not milk, no. Soon he will want more blood. Stay clear of him. He's a drog now, untrained. Come with me, little one," said Kara to the kid, snapping a rib and cutting some entangled ivy stems with protracted sharp nails. "I will return in a few days. Kyoko, know that you have performed no less than a miracle." Kara switched to her fox shape and grabbed the kid in her jaws by the scruff of the neck. From the other side of the gate, Kara switched back to human and threw some hell sweets into the fox shrine, wishing her good luck. Kyoko knew her sanity was hanging to a thread, but wondered what charming poisons her new friend had been feeding her. Later during the day, a faint half-moon over Nebelwood was soon smothered by slate-grey clouds. A few feather flakes were floating in the air, and some of the Vanaheim farmers predicted heavy snowfall that very night. Asmund had repeatedly spoken to Hilda about his siren from the northern seas, and explained how much she meant to him. Letting Kyoko freeze to death in a woodland prison was unacceptable, and he would do everything in his power to correct that mistake. Hilda reluctantly reminded him of the coastal curse, and however false it may be, the villagers would never let her near the town. being reunited with her brother, had rekindled some weak form of kin solidarity, and she promised she would inform the king of her own poor judgment concerning Kyoko. In the meantime, the two siblings set off to check on her in the forest and bring some victuals and blankets. Crunching their boots in the icy snow, Asmund and Hilda arrived in the evening at the Fox Shrine prison gate. "Who is it?" asked a frail voice from the back of the ivy cell. Hilda unlocked the gate. Asmund stooped and entered the low doorway first. Kyoko crawled out of the shadows and looked up at him, not knowing what to expect, probably the worst. And her doubts soon turned to anguish when Hilda also stepped in. The food and warm blankets Hilda was holding were a contradictory sign, though, and she waited for the guests to speak. "Kyoko, you won't believe how sorry I am to see you here, but I truly am. I hope you are all right. This has been a terrible misunderstanding, and my sister Hilda," said Asmund, turning round, "has sworn she will help free you." "She put me here, Asmund. Why will she not let me go?" "I wish it were that simple, Kyoko," said Hilda, pushing Asmund aside. "We were never properly introduced, and I apologize for that. Lady of the Sea, my name is Hilda, daughter of King Ogni, ruler of Vanaheim and soon of the Three Realms. The folk in these parts of the world are a suspicious lot. Perhaps they are where you come from." Kyoko gave a reluctant nod. "Anyhow, they need to forget about you for a while," she said. On one of the shrine walls, there were runes that had been scratched into the rock and rubbed out multiple times. Kyoko thought they must have been drawn by other prisoners. Hilda focused on them while she spoke. "And during that time, I will orchestrate your release by changing the flow of opinion in town and cast away any suspicions of your evil witchcraft." Hilda put down the blankets and said, "I hope one day we can forget about all this and be friends." Asmund knelt beside Kyoko and offered some lukewarm soup. She took the clay pot gladly in her hands and replied, "That would be good. Some things are hard to forget. I will try." "We can only try, can't we?" said Hilda, still observing the runes. "The well to hell is paved in good intentions, is it not?" "The way to hell, you mean, Hilda," corrected Asmund, busy making a fire by scratching a well-used flintstone and sending sparks onto sap and dry kindling. "Sister, you have, green liquid dripping from your mouth." "The way? Yes, indeed," said Hilda, wiping her lips with the back of her gloves. "Feeling a bit sick, brother. The juice I had for lunch must have been a bit off." Out of the corner of the eye, Hilda noticed a few health-salt wrappers on the floor. Suddenly Hilda remembered one of Voluspa's visions of a young raven that would destroy the equilibrium. Hilda's positive scully-comb attitude had definitely run out of gas, and she began to speculate what treachery the Huldra had been up to here. Kyoko sat beside Asmund and thanked him for his bearskin coat. He cracked 2 flints together more vigorously, and set lichen and dried twigs on the fire. Hilda offered to collect some wood from the forest and left them alone for a while, ignoring Asmund's weak offer to volunteer. He knew she was still in pain from the broken rib, but didn't insist. Kyoko brushed past him and picked up the torch that Hilda had thrown at her feet days before. She dipped it in the fire, setting it alight, and wedged it aggressively between 2 rocks in one of the walls. I don't know how you survived out here all by yourself, my pretty Ningyo. This coat was surely not enough, he said, wrapping an arm around her. You survived the deadly seas and the Jolmagander, so a snowy forest must have felt like a summer stroll along the beach. Strolls along the beach are, how do you say, not as good as you think, said Kyoko with a shiver. Overrated. You've been through way too much for such a young woman. I wish I could do more to help. I wish we were on your ship, sailing towards the setting sun, far from anyone we know, mused Kyoko. Wherever we go, there are sure to be other people who will try to manipulate you, or worse. Who knows what we will find beyond the horizon? Who knows, whispered Kyoko, pressing her lips against Asmund's. Hilda scraped the gate open and barged in with logs that she threw to the floor, like she had tossed Kyoko into jail. She noticed the fiery torch, but left without saying a word, leaving the gate open. Asmund, let's go now, said Kyoko. The prince considered his options, his feelings, but saw no other way out of this pickle than following Hilda's lead. His father had given him a second chance, and he would try not to disappoint him. My dear Kyoko, said Asmund, which awoke such sour memories of Takeshi's betrayal. A woman with red hair slithered around the fire. Droplets of green blood poured from her chest. But instead of falling into the flames, they floated weightlessly in the air, forming chains of liquid serpentines around the shrine. Asmund couldn't see her, and his hands crossed her body when he leaned forward to poke the black logs with a stick. The ghost whispered into Kyoko's ear, "He means well, sweet surrogate mother, but they all let you down with sorry excuses." The spirit kissed Kyoko's forehead, shed a few turquoise tears, and vanished into the flames. The log fire hissed and grew brighter, puffing out a small green cloud. Asmund didn't convey any anguish and diverted the shock by saying, "Winter will be harsh, and the seas will soon be jammed with unbreakable ice. And war is upon us. If we leave now, we'll have nowhere to run. Hilda can help us. We just need to be patient." She's helped enough already, thought Kyoko. Hilda didn't bring back any more wood. Asmund went looking for her, calling her nickname at the top of his voice, but only yelps, croaks, and cracking bark replied. The wind was building up and howled through the swishing brown leaves still attached to the ash and beech tree branches. A snowstorm was upon them, and Asmund went to find some logs. He would blunt his sword if he had to. Kyoko stood at the gate, hesitating to run out into the spiraling snow. She put one foot outside of the shrine and waited for an arrow to puncture her heart. Nothing happened, but the storm was getting out of control, and she still couldn't see Asmund. All alone again. In the end, we always are, replied the female Huldra with red hair, gliding through Kyoko's body. So nice to find living souls to talk to. How many moons or seasons has it been? Kyoko shook her untied hair in disgust and hid her chest with crossed arms. Don't do that again, she said in a temper. Ever! The ghost swiveled her body and smiled back at Kyoko as if imploring forgiveness. Yes, we should have asked for your permission, but the timing was too perfect to spoil with social ethics, especially human ethics. Kyoko put a hand on her belly and felt queasy. That didn't really happen, did it? The ghost slithered up to Kyoko, dragging suddenly long claws in the snow without leaving any tracks. It had to happen. They couldn't kill our Ever, and he will make them pay. Whatever the sacrifice, thought Kyoko. You used me like everybody does, said Kyoko, falling to her knees and spitting blue bile into the snow. Don't fool yourself, Raven from the east. Your poor little tortured soul routine might work on the living, but we've seen you work your magic on the Huldra and their enemies, and you never fail to enchant whoever you need to join your cause. Even Kara fell for your sweet song. A drog. My cause. Kyoko spat more bile between her thighs and coughed. Spare me. Poor thing. Just because you don't think you know what you're doing doesn't mean that your plans aren't already in motion. A brave Norseman, a prince, is out in the woods, alone, risking his life to warm your shivering soul. The Drogar have let you live, and some even believe you might be decisively useful. We placed our trust in you to bring back our son. In one piece, and for that we will be forever in your dead, young woman. But do not ever ask for our pity. You know what humans did to us, and do to anyone when they can get away with it. Kyoko knew what she meant. The Huldra ghost flew off into the storm. Kyoko heard Asmund call out for his sister one last time, and then finally saw him dragging dead wood in one hand and a dozen logs under the other arm. Asmund didn't lecture her when she ran out to help. By the fire, Kyoko yanked off the skin of a white hare that Asmund had brought along. Although days after she had been imprisoned in her secluded cell, she let her disappointment and resentment burn in the flames, while Asmund cooked the skinned hare, skewered on a stick. Outside, the storm had made it hard to see any further than a few pine trees. Kyoko opened the gate, peeked outside like a frightened rabbit, and gathered some soil by scraping the ground with a rock. In her frozen hands, she carried the earth back next to the fire and made a small mound, molding a crater in the center with her fingers. Asmund watched her pick up the hare's entrails and bury them in the soil with a few pine needles and frozen ash leaves. She crouched on her knees as close to the ground as she could and pushed the soil towards the edge of the fire. Kyoko sat up straight and looked around the shrine. Asmund had no clue what she was doing, rooting around for something inside the glowing grotto. He tried not to ruin the meat he was roasting on a spit while following her busy movements. She sat back down next to him to sprinkle the soil with small stones. She patted the stones lightly and asked for Asmund's poker to cover the improvised oven with hot ashes and cinders. A pity we didn't bring some ash mana wine. I have no doubt it would have made a festive addition to your new dish, said Asmund, slicing off a piece of red meat with a knife to check if it was cooked enough. I don't think you came here to celebrate, replied Kyoko, glancing at the gate. I hope your sister's all right. She isn't one to let herself die of cold, said Asmund, which made Kyoko press her chin in shame against her collarbone. Hilda always finds a way of escaping hell's wrath, and often gets what she wants. I wouldn't worry about her if I were you. We aren't too sensitive to the cold either, he said, tapping Kyoko's nose. Really, she replied, sliding her chilly fingers under his woolen tunic. Asmund removed the spit from over the fire and let it cool down beside them. Your face seems made of ice too, he said, pulling her closer. Feel free to test my resistance to your frozen lips. Kyoko pushed Asmund to the floor and crawled up on top of him. Asmund closed his eyes as she leaned towards him, but instead of kissing him, Kyoko stretched out to bite a morsel of meat out of the roasted hare. Delicious! Asmund laughed and had a taste himself on her tongue. Kyoko stroked his scarred face caringly. After a passionate night and a welcome nap, they woke up to a shrine bathed in pale blue light. There were still embers to get the fire going again, but the gate had been completely blocked off by a huge snowdrift. Kyoko removed the bearskin coats they were resting under and added a few small logs to the fire. She used the clay pot to fetch some snow and let it melt over the ashes. When it was warm, she picked up the pot with her torn yukata cloth and walked over to the shrine's entrance. Asmund watched Kyoko during her morning ablution ritual and looked away when she used the water to wash her face and private parts. Your arm has healed well, he said. Thanks to you, Kyoko replied. Hardly. Only a few moons ago, your skin was bleeding out ochre juices. The air of your Norse home must have cured me. It feels much better, said Kyoko, twisting her arm gracefully while thinking of Kara's green stab apple. Praise air. At least the gods gave you the welcome you deserved, said Asmund, full of sorrow. Asmund dressed and turned to sharpen his knife. The hilt was made of elk bone, and the blade was thin and yet sturdy enough to end the life of wounded game. When he had finished, Kyoko had melted more snow to make some ash leaf tea, apologizing in advance for the poor quality. She had also dug up the cooked gizzards and served in breakfast on 2 flat rocks. Asmund thanked her with a kiss on the back of her head. I will have to go looking for Hilda soon and bring you some more victuals, Kyoko. I must also see the king and persuade him to let you go. When the snow has melted, Kyoko said. When the snow has melted, he replied, who knows how wide the shields of snow are around us? A skulk of fox kits imprinted fresh patterns in the immaculate snow on top of the hidden shrine. They played and played, running around in wild circles, slightly confused about not finding their favorite cave. Only a few tips of ash tree saplings and large pine tree branches caught in the white carpet would lead anyone to guess that there had ever been a hill there at all. See you next time for Chapter 6 of the Hildur Chronicles.